Hi there. Hi, I'm Jill Stenerson, and I'm with my colleague Jonathan Glover, and we are the co-facilitators of Marriage Recovery's Dual Core program. And we are going to talk with you a little bit today about the process of change. The Dual Core program, the difference between core and dual core is number one, there's two of us, so dual, duo, dual. The second is we saw a real need with some of our clients in terms of real low distress tolerance and the ability to emotionally regulate. And so we've woven in DBT and CBT, which are therapy modalities that Jonathan and I both have been trained in and taught in for a lot of years to really target that growing really frankly out of emotional immaturity into maturity by being able to manage your emotions better, tolerate the difficult feelings, and be able to respond in a more relational way. So Jonathan, I have a question for you. We were going to talk a little bit about, we talk about change quite a bit in the group. We start there actually in the first couple of weeks talking about the stages of change, barriers to change, what you need to be focusing on to change. But today we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of our experience in terms of what clients have more success around change in this program. So Jonathan, I want to start you with maybe kind of the not so changed clients. What do you see as being kind of commonalities of the guys that are in group and really don't walk out with significant change, either personally or in that relationship?
Yeah. Uh, let's see. We see these stuck clients a lot of times right out of the gates when we're first meeting them in evaluations, or even with some of the guys who have agreed to do the group and give it a try, but there's a lot of uncertainty there, and sometimes a lot of fear of the unknown, not knowing what this is going to mean. I would say that in general, some of the similarities with those stuck clients are a a lot of focus on defending themselves, a lot of focus on uh, saying, these things that you are saying about me, or these things that you're saying that I'm doing, and then going into trying to explain those away or to defend against them, or to do a lot of the shifting and pointing out where she is not performing perfectly, or where she is also doing the same types of things. So it's a lot of that defensive, that kind of narcissistic defense, the blame shifting, and the what's called the victim stance. So seeing themselves as this helpless victim of what she is making him do, or what this program is forcing him into. I think a lot of times what we hear is, she wants me to be somebody that I'm not. She wants to change who I am. And they're not really focusing on what it is that she's saying or why she's saying that, but rather just getting into that defensive space. I think there's also a lot of focus on what he is deserved, or what would be fair. There's a lot of focus. A lot of times I hear guys talking about timelines. Well, if I agree to do this group, when am I going to be able to move back into the bedroom? If I agree to do this marriage counseling or this evaluation, does that mean I get sex this weekend? That sort of focus on this timeline and what it is that he wants. It's really not it misses the point, and really is not focusing much on what it is that she needs, or really what would be healthy for the marriage. So I don't know. Do you have would you have more to add to that
I'm
list?
thinking, yeah, I mean, I can think in once we're in group, I think for Jonathan and I, we've been doing this long enough, we can kind of spot that. I think another real barrier or kind of common theme for guys that stay stuck are hyper focused on the outcome of the marriage, which is understandable. You're at the, you've come to the marriage recovery center because you're hoping to save your marriage. Maybe you even entered the group because it's like, yeah, your wife has said you've got to take it. And so you're hoping that that outcome um, is obviously a saved marriage. And we all hope for that. But the group doesn't really have much to do with that. And so if the focus is on it's not improved, I'm not seeing her move closer towards me in this process, or she's still, she's not seeing, she's not I'm making all these changes, she's not acknowledging any of them. Then there becomes this like weighted system of like, well, the group's not helping because see, she's not any happier than with me than before. And maybe I've kind of pitched myself. Do you have more to say
Well,
about that, Jonathan? Because yeah, go ahead.
no, I was actually going to ask you, of the guys that you are seeing really make significant progress, or get into a different sort of space where it's they're really digging into the material and they're really making good use of it. What what similarities with that group of guys, and it might not be right out of the gates, it might be
Right.
that something that they develop, or they move into over the time. What How would you categorize that change, and really, almost that space that they get into, that heart change?
So I think we have kind of a mixed bag. I'll make up a statistic, 50-50 guys coming in like I'm a mess, I'm terrible. I've made a mess of this. Maybe half of our guys, I don't know, I'll make that's arbitrary number. And then half of the guys saying my wife says I need this. And I don't think that is really a determiner at all on in terms of what happens in the process of doing this work. So I like to use sports metaphors. Jonathan hears me use this one a lot, but I think of heart change as a little bit, I think of like a baseball metaphor. So you can take the core group and you're coming in and saying, you know what, my wife, in this case, my pitching coach, is saying my fastball is no good anymore, and I need to learn how to throw a curveball. And so I'm going to come in the group and I am going to learn how to throw a curveball. My instinct is to throw a fastball, but I'm going to learn the skills, and that's what Jonathan and I are focused on teaching skills on countering the desire to throw the fastball and developing your curveball that and I think we have a lot of guys that do that really do, especially in that 14 weeks. They are throwing curveballs, they are decreasing their throwing of the fastball, but the difference between somebody who has heart change, we'll call it, versus like developing that curveball is they start saying my fastball's lousy. I don't need the pitching coach to tell me that my fastball is lousy. I actually know it's terrible. It's a terrible fastball. And the difference between between someone who makes long lasting changes is they have to believe their fastball is a problem. They may come in saying, I'll rely on the pitching coach. Okay, I'll learn a new pitch, but they will instinctively keep going back to that fastball until negative feedback, until that homer gets hit, until it keeps getting hit. And in this case, my metaphor will fall flat a little bit, but in this case, the homer is their wife's upset. You've hurt her again. You threw the fastball again. And so the heart changes. You are saying, what I'm doing is a problem. And I think to Jonathan's point, when we think about the guys in our groups, I mean, I can think of guys who have gotten to that 10th, 11th week. And in that 11th week, it's finally kicked in. And then we've got guys who've come in who are said I'm a problem, and they go 14 weeks and they don't get any further than that. Harm has been reduced, but things haven't really changed significantly in the relationship. And then again, of course, there's ongoing work beyond that, but that significant change comes when you actually take full ownership over it. And that, that's not really up to us. We do a lot of work on reflecting that and pushing towards that and breaking through that denial, but that is the piece you have. And we all know that you don't lose weight without actually believing you need to. You won't engage in those behaviors consistently unless you think it's a problem, no matter what your doctor says. So do you have more to add to that, Jonathan?
Well, a lot of times we get the question of, okay, so I do want to make the change. I just don't know how, or I don't know how to get to that space of that heart change and stay there. Um, so the question that sometimes we get from the guys, and a lot of times we get from the wives, is how does that transition happen? And I think to to echo what you just said, it's different with a lot of different guys. I think sometimes there is an individual session that we have with them, or we do that check-in session, and that is sort of a game changer. They suddenly have this aha moment where they start seeing things very, very differently. I think another thing that I notice is the focal point starts to become much more on her and her needs and her experience, and much less uh, on him and what it means for him, and what these terms, this gaslighting, this narcissism, the defensiveness about the terms. It's like those guys that get to that space where they're making that they're able to sit in that change. They're recognizing that those terms are not really, they're not condemning them. They're not saying this is who you are. It's saying about her, it's saying this is what she's experiencing, and can we please do it different, and will you help do it different? And that's, I think, the focal point, and the curiosity and the empathy that comes from that, uh, really, I think, makes a huge difference as well. But what about you? Do you think, do you how do you respond to that question of how to get
I
there?
Yeah, sometimes I go, great question. I have no idea. I think some guys, this maybe is a little bit off trail, off track, but some of the guys, I think Jonathan and I have talked a lot about this idea of like you've got this emotional reactivity to, incoming feedback, which with our guys is something critical in nature, and then they have this emotional reaction. And so we're doing a lot of work on countering that, developing new skills. There, for some of our guys, there is a whole secondary problem, and I think this gets tackled, to your point, Jonathan, in maybe sometimes ongoing work, individual work, separate work. They have narrative problems. They have actual belief systems that are problematic, that
I'll go as far as to say
fuel,
it's delusional at times.
yeah, yeah, are just super unhelpful, kooky, archaic thoughts and narratives about how this should be, how it is. And we've had some guys in our groups, not an insignificant number, frankly, who don't have as much of an emotion regulation problem, have more of a narrative problem. And you're not going to own it if you actually continually think that these underpinning beliefs are what they are. Then we're throwing against a brick wall that we're not going to get anywhere. So again, if I've got a guy who's stuck, and we Jonathan and I have these conversations pretty regularly in group, you're just off, man. Your thinking is super off about this. This is not emotional in your response. It is disordered or unrelational thinking. You're entitled to it, but if you want to change your relationship, you're going to have to blow that narrative up, or not. But that's another, I think, real barrier to change, and that, you don't really get at that in group. That's sometimes additional work. So that's another sort of um, barrier. But I think the guys that make the changes really do take ownership, and then they practice, and I know we're going to have future videos about that, but it's repetitive. It's like any change. We've all changed things in our lives. It requires consistent practice, or it will last the 14 weeks and then not much longer.
If you have any questions about what we've talked about today, or about our programs, definitely um, get in touch with the front desk, and they'd be happy to direct you to the appropriate person, or answer any questions that you have.